Timing is everything. So when any news came out, and especially this Brandon Aiyuk news dropped on Friday, I asked myself, why did this come out now? On Saturday, when we had a chance to see Kyle Shanahan's response to the news being released on Friday, Kyle Shanahan said, well, this is a development that happened way back in July. That's when Brandon Aiyuk's guarantees for 2026 were voided. And I felt that deepened the question. Why did this come out now? It's several months after July. And I think that we may be trending toward that question being answered. The latest plot twist or the latest development, it is what's been a frenetic 3 days on the Brandon Aiyuk front, is that Mike Garafolo of the NFL Network, just now during one of the Insiders pregame shows, really emphasized, and this is obviously coming from reporting connected to the 49ers building, really emphasized that the 49ers want Brandon Aiyuk back on the field, and he doubled, tripled down on the notion prior to Friday that had been the prevailing notion that Brandon Aiyuk is close to being cleared. First, remember what Kyle Shanahan said yesterday about wanting Brandon Aiyuk back in the fold. A lot of people were obviously very focused on the legal talk, and I thought that was the biggest takeaway from the press conference, talking about lawyers, talking about the fact that whatever happened in July to void the guarantees was outside the coach's purview. I still think that's the most significant takeaway, but maybe the most timely one came through Kyle Shanahan's insistence that he wants to see Brandon Aiyuk back out on the football field. And I'll bring that all full circle and explain in just a second. But first, let's see what Mike Garafolo said up on NFL Network this morning. He said that the voiding of the guarantees was a couple months ago. And since then, the 49ers have been committed to getting Aiyuk healthy and back on the field. Okay, that's what we've been reporting for several weeks. So just because next year has been voided doesn't necessarily mean that this was going to be a divorce by the sides. The belief is that Aiyuk is close to being cleared for his return from that ACL injury, but he hasn't got it yet. And Kyle Shanahan has said every week we're looking for when that clearance is coming and when he's going to go back to practice. Hasn't happened yet. Still hope that he's going to be back on the field for the 49ers. 2026 is yet to be written. If he gets back and plays well, he could be a 49er next year, but right now, sort of in limbo. That from Mike Garafolo. Okay, so we're going to play the video from Kyle Shanahan yesterday, just so you don't think that this is coming from a total vacuum from Mike Garafolo. The Kyle Shanahan hinting at some of this stuff as well, while he talks about the contract voiding, while he answered questions about the contract voiding back in July. Here's Shanahan from yesterday.
Yeah, of course. I've been coaching over 20 years, and I've never been in a situation where a contract's been voided, so it was extremely unusual to me.
And personally, I mean, I imagine you were very in support of him getting a new contract. We know how weird that negotiation was. But do you feel let down by the situation?
Yeah, I'm not really there yet. Like, I know everyone got a lot of information yesterday. That was information that I found out in July and kind of dealt with it then. And to me, the contract stuff and guarantees and things like that is really, it's irrelevant to my relationship with the player and my relationship with our team and what we're trying to do this year. I know I went through that stuff and talked to him a lot about it back in July. But since July, it's been all about this season and hoping he would get healthy, and he's been working to get healthy, and I've been waiting for him to come back when he's healthy.
Well, obviously the 49ers and Aiyuk are not on the same page. Everything that we've gathered from the fact that Kyle Shanahan says that he has had a little difficulty communicating with Brandon Aiyuk. Those aren't Kyle Shanahan's exact words, but yesterday he did say that the communication there hasn't been great. To everything from that to obvious leaks to the media here from the 49ers, I think that's very clear, suggests that the 49ers and the receiver aren't on the same page. I mean, we've seen Brandon Aiyuk out on the practice field this year, trying to showcase his speed to the media, but that was 2 months ago. We haven't seen that since, and it's all complicated because Brandon Aiyuk hadn't left the 49ers facility altogether. He still is rehabbing there, and then we have all this contract voiding discussion. $27 million left on the table. I mean, that's about as dramatic as it gets from a financial standpoint, but it happened way back in July. But again, I bring you to my original question. Why did this information come out now? Are the 49ers about to open Brandon Aiyuk's practice window? Is that going to happen this next week or at some point in the next couple of weeks? And are they sending an opening message or a preparatory message for such a move? Because Brandon Aiyuk right now currently is uncooperative and doesn't want to play. I think it's a very, very logical next question to ask based on everything that has come out so far. Most recently, today's report from the NFL Network and Mike Garafolo, which is out of this 3 days of news flurry, which is the most clear-cut focus on, hey, wait, everybody step back. The 49ers are actually pushing to get this guy back on the field. It makes sense that the 49ers would want Brandon Aiyuk back out there when there's no longer a guarantee risk for them in 2026. Remember that, when Aiyuk got hurt, I mean, that was just such a devastating injury to so many things. Obviously, 3 ligaments torn for Brandon Aiyuk, but they had just signed that contract, and that contract had a trigger on April 1st of this year, April 1st of 2025, that triggered $27 million in full guarantees for 2027. That essentially had stuck the 49ers in cement. In terms of incentive game, it might have stuck Brandon Aiyuk in cement. I mean, why come back to play and risk something from such a severe injury? Why push yourself to come back in 2026 if $27 million of 2026 is fully guaranteed? If the 49ers are interested in trading Brandon Aiyuk, their hands are tied. Again, they're stuck in cement if 2026 has a massive guarantee of $27 million. So both sides can't really move, are incentivized to move in a situation where 2026 has such a massive guarantee. And that's why that guarantee is now gone. The 49ers likely contractually protected themselves. I mean, we could read through the lines here. Parag Marathe is a really good negotiator. They very likely contractually protected themselves with, you could call it a poison pill, or you could just call it standard contract language that adheres to rehab rules, camp reporting time, training, like meeting attendance. I'm not going to go through all the legalese that we typically would see if we delved into one of these NFL contracts. But obviously there was something in there that the 49ers felt that was broached, and they had legal standing to void the guarantees in 2026. With that $27 million guaranteed wiped out, the 49ers incentive game for Brandon Aiyuk's return in 2025 changes drastically. But so does Brandon Aiyuk's, right? The 49ers, they don't have that 2026 guarantee on the books anymore for Brandon Aiyuk. They've been able to turn this essentially into a week-by-week contract after this season because the 2025 guarantees are still in place. Well, they've already paid for 2025 with the guarantees and the option bonus this year. If Brandon Aiyuk gets healthy in time, they would want him out on the field. Makes total sense they'd want him out on the field. Maybe he could showcase some value, and then they could trade him after this season. But if you just look at this at face value from Brandon Aiyuk's perspective, why would he want to get back out on the field? They voided his guarantees. Seems like that's where the rift might be. This is me speculating. This is me just reading the tea leaves, looking at the facts. 49ers would want him out there. Brandon Aiyuk, no guarantees in 2026. Brandon Aiyuk wouldn't want to be out there. Yeah, he has no guarantees in 2026. When the Raiders, and I don't want to say that these situations are exactly the same, but from a contract mechanic standpoint, the Raiders in 2019 voided Antonio Brown's guarantees. There was some crazy stuff that went down at the facility, some outbursts at the facility. Nobody's saying that this has happened with Brandon Aiyuk, but the Raiders voided $30 million of Antonio Brown's guarantees. NFL personal conduct policy said, he violated that. And but then they said, we still want him to suit up. This was a few days before the opener of the 2019 season. Antonio Brown had yet to play a single snap for the Raiders. And Antonio Brown told a reporter through an email back in 2019, no, I'm not playing in week 1. They voided my guarantees. I'm on a week-by-week contract. Raiders release me. He even recorded a phone call between himself and John Gruden, who was the Raiders coach at the time, and then put out an Instagram post or a tweet or whatever it was, somewhere on social media. He said, Raiders release me. Ultimately, they did, and obviously Antonio Brown never played a snap for the Raiders. Anyway, it stands to reason that the player who's had guarantees voided, especially so soon, this was less than a year after Brandon Aiyuk signed his $120 million contract, it stands to reason that that player won't want to play for that team. But he still is under contract, and the 49ers, Kyle Shanahan talked about lawyers being involved yesterday, and obviously it seemed to be outside of Shanahan's purview, whatever happened in July to trigger those voided guarantees. The contract still has footing for the 49ers. Brandon Aiyuk decided not to fight, or at least according to the reporting on Friday, which came out, he decided not to file a grievance through the NFLPA to try to recoup some of those guarantees in 2026. So we move forward, and at the current moment, divorce pending or not for the 49ers, at the current moment, Brandon Aiyuk is under contract with San Francisco through 2028. I've already gone through all the financial ramifications of this moving forward for the 49ers. It doesn't make sense for them to move him until next offseason, probably not until after June 1st, so they can shoulder some of that dead money hit and stiff arm it into the future. So if you just look at this pragmatically, Aiyuk is under contract. Aiyuk might be returning to health based on everything that we've heard about his recovery. Based on logic, it's now over a year since he underwent surgery. And the 49ers are going to push to get him back out on the field. Whether or not Aiyuk obliges is obviously the coming crux of this issue. And maybe because of that disconnect, that's why this information is being released right now. Maybe that's why the 49ers want this out there right now. Maybe that's why we heard from Mike Garafolo today. Maybe he's heard from the 49ers building. Maybe there's an emphasis coming from the 49ers building to the media that they want Brandon Aiyuk on the field because they're close to opening his practice window. So what would happen next here? If the 49ers did open Aiyuk's practice window, remember, he has been rehabbing at the facility. So the 49ers team doctors at the facility, they can clear Brandon Aiyuk to return at any point if he is indeed at that spot. He currently is on the PUP list, physically unable to perform. If they do open his practice window, it is 3 weeks long at maximum. You have to decide on the 21st day whether or not you activate the player from PUP to the 53-man roster, or if he reverts back to PUP, which is the physically unable to perform list. It is not 3 games long. It is 3 weeks long. So keep in mind the 49ers schedule here over the course of the next month. They play Carolina, the Panthers, on Monday Night Football. If you guys want to talk about that game in a few minutes, we will. We got a nice NFL slate coming up here in a few minutes. Then they head to Cleveland to play the Browns. That's a week from now. So next Sunday, we're about, it's 9:44 a.m. right now on Pacific time. Next Sunday, I believe that's an early kickoff in Cleveland. The 49ers are going to play that really good Browns defense. Then they have a bye week. And following the bye week, the 49ers play the Tennessee Titans at home. So you look at a 3-week window. Say that they open Brandon Aiyuk's practice window on Wednesday. without knowing if they're going to get cooperation from Brandon Aiyuk to actually return to practice based on the rift, based on the drama that we're very clearly sensing right now. Say that they open it on Wednesday, they would have 3 weeks from that point, 21 days to activate him. So that would be December 3rd, it would be 7 days. December 10th would be 14 days. December 17th would be 21 days. That would be right after the 49ers bye week against the Tennessee Titans. So they, you know, you're looking at the stretch run of the season right now. You're looking at the 49ers for the reason that I might have just outlined, starting to bring a Brandon Aiyuk situation that had, initially taken a big turn in July, starting to bring that to light. Remember that from July to November, I mean, that this is a 4-month stretch. The media outside didn't learn of the voided contract guarantees. Nobody found out about these. Like, you're not having Ian Rappaport, not Adam Schefter. Nobody is taking this information on the outside and broadcasting it out. Even Brandon Aiyuk, a couple months after the contract voidings is running out on the 49ers practice field, we had seen him in the 49ers locker room. So obviously this was something that was in the past. Stuff that didn't come out for 4 months. A bombshell piece of information finally came out on Friday. We asked ourselves about the timing. Kyle Shanahan had a chance to address it. We showed you exactly what he said. He spoke of his hands really being tied about what happened in July. He said that he hadn't had time to be disappointed yet because he's still focusing on his own team and on Brandon Aiyuk getting back out on the practice field. And then as the coup de grace, the final third piece of this 3-day deluge of information, Mike Garafolo of the NFL Network posts or says something. He said this actually on the show this morning. I just transcribed it. Says something that is the most clear-cut broadcast of 49ers intentions as far as getting Brandon Aiyuk back out on the field. So it would not shock me, based on everything that I've seen so far, if the 49ers opened up Brandon Aiyuk's practice window very, very soon. I don't know if it would be this week. I don't know if it would be after the bye, but soon. And then at that point, get your popcorn out. So we would have to see if Brandon Aiyuk would cooperate with that and actually practice. Obviously, hold in has already been an issue with Brandon Aiyuk, albeit in a very separate situation back when his representation was negotiating for a new contract back in 2024. This would bring a whole new level of drama to the fold. But given the voidings that are already in the past, I think it's actually even past the statute of limitations for Brandon Aiyuk to file a grievance. And as we know from Mike Silver and Diana Rossini's reporting on Friday, Aiyuk chose not to file a grievance. So the $27 million is gone as far as guarantees go in 2026. This is essentially a year-to-year deal with the 49ers now, 2026, 2027, 2028. They have him under contract for 3 more years past this. But they also have him under contract this year. And Aiyuk is now in that, not in the practice window to return, but in the general return estimate window, the 12 to 18 months that we had long talked about. He got hurt on October 20th of 2024 against the Kansas City Chiefs. Tore 3 ligaments in his knee. Whenever it's more than just ACL damage, you almost automatically throw out he's going to be back in a record amount of time, 8 to 9 months or whatever. You throw that out the window. You start, especially with 3 ligaments, you start talking about 12 to 18 months. That's the general rule of thumb, especially for elite athletes. For regular people, if they tore 3 ligaments, it might be quite a bit longer on average than that. But 12 to 18 months is the window you talk about. Aiyuk suffered the injury on October 20th. He didn't have surgery until late November because of the swelling, and they had to wait for it to subside. So we have just crossed the 1-year mark since surgery. So we are officially in that 12 to 18 month window We've heard them talking about this miraculously fast recovery for Brandon Aiyuk. We've seen him running out on the practice field. I think it's really, really important to emphasize that this video right here actually happened. This was on September 17th. This was over 2 months ago. We've seen Brandon Aiyuk running fairly fast on the 49ers practice field. So it's not crazy to think that the medical clearance could happen at some point soon. And that's what Mike Garafolo said today. That's what they've been repeating every single week. So that can be true. And so can the fact that Brandon Aiyuk and the 49ers are currently at odds. And, I try to stay away from as much speculation as possible, but this is why I couch all of these shows with, if I'm going to tell you something that isn't demonstrated to be rooted in total fact, this is speculation. And I think in this situation, because there's so much that we don't know, so much that, maybe both sides are legally barred from repeating. Kyle Shanahan said that lawyers were involved. Like he used the word lawyers twice yesterday when he was talking about the July incident at the start of training camp that voided the 2026 guarantees for Brandon Aiyuk. I mean, there's a chance that neither side is going to be able to talk about this due to some kind of legally binding agreement. Again, that's just me speculating here, but the point is that there is such a vacuum of information. That's why this has been such a strange 3 days, because we're getting a lot of information, but it also still is just a relative breadcrumb trail compared to the entire totality of what's going on. So there has to be some speculating. How is this getting from point A to point B? Why is this information being released right now? I know that Brandon Aiyuk has been working toward full health. I know that the 49ers and Aiyuk himself seemed relatively optimistic about that, over the course of essentially the entire fall up until this point. And it seems that maybe that optimism from the 49ers side regarding full health has persisted even while this news has hit. That can happen, and a rift between them and Brandon Aiyuk can also happen, and that can set the stage for some popcorn, a little bit of a showdown here. Maybe the 49ers open that practice window, and then we sit back and we see if Brandon Aiyuk does start practicing, and then we could all film him running at practice again. And then we could see if they open things up, because we know that the guarantee for 2026 has now been voided. We know that the 49ers are in much more advantageous contractual position than they were before July. We just didn't find out about this voiding in July until now. We still don't know exactly what caused that voiding to occur. According to Mike Silver and Diana Rossini, it was due to some missed meetings. But then when we heard the timing from Kyle Shanahan, he said it happened at the very start of training camp. So did he miss the very first meeting? And was there, I use the word poison pill. I don't want to be dramatic, but was there a clause in the contract that said if he misses the first meeting of training camp, all guarantees for 2026 are voided? I don't know. But I do know that Kyle Shanahan zeroed in on the timing being the start of training camp. And I do know that he mentioned that this was outside his purview and that lawyers were involved. And it seemed that he was in a relative straitjacket trying to talk about some of this stuff. So wow, just wow. Familiarize yourselves with what Mike Garafolo said today. Ask yourselves why he'd be saying something like this at this exact time. I think it's fair to assume that the 3-day barrage of information is not accidental. So you can also ask yourselves why this all started on Friday. Reconcile that with what Kyle Shanahan has been saying in general, what John Lynch has been saying in general, with Brandon Aiyuk running on the field a couple months ago. And don't be surprised if that practice window opens soon. And then I don't know what to tell you. Then we'll see what happens. Then we'll see how big this rift between Aiyuk and the 49ers is. All I know is that the 49ers play a Monday Night Football game this week. Brandon Aiyuk is not going to be out there. I know a lot of you would probably rather talk about the 49ers against the Carolina Panthers. San Francisco still 7-point favorites. Ricky Pearsall, I put the video of Ricky talking about this situation up yesterday. I think he's going to have a lot of catches this week. I think he's going to be very much higher up in the progression order for the 49ers. I think that, they've got Jawan Jennings. I asked Jawan yesterday in the locker room, how you feeling? How the ribs doing? I haven't checked in a few weeks. And he said that he's feeling healthier and healthier by the week. It certainly looks like that on the field for Jawan Jennings. That's going to be a fascinating twist heading into the offseason, like a downstream effect of all this. Like, did the 49ers decide to pay Jawan Jennings $15 million a year this offseason? Or, it had been reported that there was an offer in the $12 million range on the table for Jennings. He didn't accept it. He decided to try to play prove-it football for this season. Then he broke the 5 ribs against Jacksonville. I mean, that's been really, really tough. That, goes back all the way to 2024. Jennings signed a smaller deal ahead of 2024. Aiyuk signed a massive deal ahead of 2024. One of those guys performed, one didn't. The one who performed was the one who signed the smaller deal, Jawan Jennings. So a lot of people said, well, the 49ers paid the wrong receiver. Unfortunately, even if that is true, the contracts were signed, sealed, and delivered by this point. I don't know if that led to any frustration or animosity from Jawan Jennings' standpoint, but he seems to be in much better spirits now than he was at the start of the year when he talked about those 5 broken ribs that he suffered against Jacksonville. And we'll see what the 49ers do with him contractually this offseason, especially now that they're free of the guaranteed money on Brandon Aiyuk's deal in 2026. Anyway, we got a fun slate of NFL games today, and I'll check in with you guys. The 49ers, by the way, up to 7.5-point favorites against the Carolina Panthers. So that line continues to grow. We can call it a CMC revenge game. Carolina traded him. Christian McCaffrey, he said the other day that the one thing that he regretted most was not being able to say bye to his teammates. Remember that trade went down on a Thursday evening, so Thursday night in Carolina. So he was already long gone out of the facility. I remember being dark in San Francisco. I know it gets dark early at this time of the year, but it was dark in San Francisco. I was driving around. I was like near downtown, the financial district. I think I was going down to the Mission to get a burrito or something. And news hit that Christian McCaffrey had been traded to the 49ers. So I rushed home. We still had like a janky studio set up. I wasn't in this spot back then. And did a live. And we were live for like 2 hours. And, we were talking about the Stanford days. Congratulations to them. They beat Cal last night. But we were talking about the Stanford days covering Christian McCaffrey. And we were just, in awe of the jaw-dropping news. But it turns out that Christian, because it was even later in Charlotte, 3 hours later on the East Coast, had to get on a plane the very next morning and never got a chance to say bye to his Panthers teammates. And that was the team that had drafted him in 2017, flew to San Francisco, private jet, of course. 49ers chartered a plane for him, and was able to show up in time and go through a physical and be on the practice field in time on that Friday to get ready to play the Chiefs. And he saw a few snaps against the Chiefs. It wasn't until the following week against the Rams where McCaffrey was heavily involved. And in that game, he threw a touchdown. He caught a touchdown and he ran for a touchdown. I mean, that was insane, right? Christian McCaffrey right out of bed with the 49ers dominated. But we still have to remember how abruptly he had to leave the Carolina Panthers. And now he gets to face Carolina for the first time in his NFL career. All right, games today. We got the Steelers and the Bears. That's interesting to me. Aaron Rodgers is not going to play. So Chicago is favored in that game by 3. Chicago hadn't really won too many games of impressive consequence so far this year, but they're 7-3, and they're leaders in their division. They're going to be headed to Levi's Stadium for a Sunday night game in about a month on December 28th, which should have really, really big playoff implications. So keep your eyes on the Bears. I'm excited to watch that game. Patriots, Bengals. I cared about the Bengals a few weeks ago, back when it looked like they might trade Trey Hendrickson and others, but then they decided to hold on to a ridiculous price for Trey Hendrickson, and that's why the Bengals are the Bengals. Joe Burrow might be back very soon, coming off of the toe surgery, but today they face the favored Patriots. Watch Drake May if you haven't yet. Speaking of the Patriots, remember Brandon Aiyuk turned down a trade to New England? They would have paid him $32 million. They would have sent the 49ers some draft compensation, and I think maybe all sides would have been better for it. he also turned down other trades, and then the 49ers ultimately paid him, even though there was a trade with the Pittsburgh Steelers on the table. But the New England Patriots, 9-2, maybe they wouldn't have gone out and gotten Stephon Diggs. Maybe Brandon Aiyuk would have been Drake May's top receiver. Who knows? That alternate reality is crazy to think about, but Aiyuk was being very difficult in that 2024 negotiation process. Giants and the Lions, Detroit 14-point favorites. Detroit just lost Sam Laporta for the season. He had back surgery. It's been a tough year for the Lions, just like tough sledding. Seems like the Lions are running into a bit of the resistance that typically comes after you go on a pair of playoff runs. 49ers had to fight that in 2024. It was a total disaster for them. But when you play physical brand of football, and we know Detroit does, and they've been one of the prominent teams in this league now for a couple years, eventually you need kind of a rest reset year, or you're going to get beaten up in that year. And I think the Lions are 6-4, so they're still contending. They're 14-point favorites today. Not saying they're chopped liver. It's just not the same powerhouse that we saw last season. Vikings and the Packers, that's interesting to me. I mean, Green Bay has underperformed relative to the talent this year. They're favorites. They're 6-3-1. They're going to host the division rival at home in Minnesota. Seahawks and the Titans, probably a game that shouldn't be scheduled. Seahawks coming off of a loss to the Rams. We'll see if they take it out on Tennessee, 1-9 on the road. Colts Chiefs is really good. I mean, Colts Chiefs is intriguing to me. 8-2 Colts against the Chiefs, who are favored against the 8-2 Colts at home. Wow, that should be fun. Jets Ravens. The Ravens are back to 500. They're surging and they're 14-point favorites. This is a good slate of football today. Browns Raiders. Now I'll skip that one, although the 49ers play the Browns next, so maybe I'll put on NFL Red Zone to keep an eye on that. That's the afternoon window. Jags Cardinals. I don't want to watch the Cardinals commit 17 penalties again, so I'll skip that. Eagles Cowboys. Yes, that's intriguing to me. The Eagles making a case to be the best team in the NFL right now. Dallas can score points, though. It's going to be interesting seeing Dallas, division rival, against that Eagles defense. And we got Falcons Saints. I'll skip that one. Not interested at all. Finally, the Sunday night game today is Buccaneers Rams. Yes, please. I will be watching Baker Mayfield against his former team, the Rams. Remember when Baker came in very end of the game against the Rams? Going to be good stuff. Very end of the season for the Rams, not against the Rams. He was I think it was a Thursday night game, and he beat the Raiders in 2023 after the 49ers decided not to pick up Baker Mayfield off of waivers. The 49ers would have rather gone with Brock Purdy, and they were correct back in that 2023 season. But Bucks Rams, that's going to be awesome. And then, of course, 49ers Panthers tomorrow. All right, that's the news. Let's see what happens next. Consider me intrigued. Enjoy your football Sunday.